On the 26th of August 2024, the UK news channel's headlines featured a story about a drug smuggling operation led by a gang of Indian men who were sentenced to 80 years in prison. This wasn't because they were drug dealers. This sentence was carefully awarded because these gang members ran one of the most audacious smuggling and importing operations ever caught. This is the story of how a gang of Indian men managed to import drugs worth millions of pounds, all under the cover of frozen chicken. It all started in early 2020 when officers from the West Midlands Regional Organised Crime Unit began investigating unusual activities of a locally owned business. A meat import company received massive shipments of frozen chicken from overseas. However, their presence was very little. They had no brands, no marketing, and no pictures. What they did have were pallets and cartons full of frozen chicken, and with no brand, such huge loads were extremely suspicious. For a couple of months, the authorities kept a strict check on the chicken. It was extremely well packaged in cardboard boxes, wrapped with plastic and even vacuum sealed. With regular deliveries of meat importers, this would be a routine thing. However, for a company that runs no ads, has no employee photos, or anything else that seemed legitimate, this was a tad too professional. So, in July 2020, the port authorities, along with the West Midlands Police, decided to conduct a deeper investigation. They checked the food trucks, meat pallets, itineraries, and invoices. Everything seemed to check out at first sight, but there were some dark secrets hidden within the chicken itself. When the police followed the money trail, accounts, and the communications between the importer and the receivers, that is when things started to unravel. The chicken business wasn't really a legitimate business at all. It was a front for a vast criminal network stretching from Birmingham to London. Their vans had hidden compartments, their cash flows were huge and suspicious, and all of their conversations were through encrypted phones. Only one question came to mind: what kind of poultry business has hidden compartments and uses encrypted phones? The police knew that something dark and dangerous was cooking behind this chicken business. They just didn't know what. The only way to find out was to conduct raids. However, it wasn't as simple as conducting a raid against a local street criminal. Finally, the police started a series of highly coordinated raids across the country. Birmingham, Sandwell, Wolverhampton, Walsall, and South Staffordshire were the key areas. Within just 10 days, the police apprehended and arrested at least 10 men, all connected directly to the frozen chicken operation. But how did the arrests take place? During the arrests, Maninder Dosanjh and Amandeep Rishi were stopped in a van in Birmingham on their way back from Essex. The van was loaded with chicken produce, but hidden inside it was 150 kilograms of cocaine. Similarly, Mohammed Usman, another gang member, was followed by the police to a place in the West Midlands where he collected wheels and tyres. He drove them straight to London and handed them over to Syed Hashiman in a residential area. The police confiscated these tyres, and when they were slashed open, nearly £500,000 fell out in cash. But this was just the beginning of an insane drug bust. The massive amount of cocaine gave the authorities a clear idea that these people weren't the average drug dealers. They were high rollers, flush with cash, and possibly had the backing of an even larger criminal organization. Within a few months, an irregular frozen chicken shipment became one of the most significant drug hauls in modern British history. Now, the police had a significant chunk of drugs. They knew the shipment routines and the cover. However, they had no idea about how big of an operation this was. Were cartels involved? Was it a relatively small-scale operation? Or was this drug ring being run by a massive shadow network right here in the UK? The answers to these questions were imperative, and there was only one way to get them: more raids and investigations. Within the next months, the police gathered as much intel as they could. Every piece of information was necessary because it could lead to piles of drugs, drug money, and maybe even unravel more dark secrets of the gang. That is when the police landed upon a gold mine. They raided a warehouse in Sutton Coldfield where 225 kilograms of cocaine was stored safely, all bound for Australia. This showed that the gang wasn't importing cocaine into the UK and just selling it here. They were actually running an international operation where they shipped the drugs from Mexico to all parts of the world. By now, 400 kilograms of cocaine, £1.6 million in cash, and 10 gang members were in police custody. It was a massive drug bust, and it made the national news. But the case wasn't over just yet. The police still had to determine their mode of communication and what encrypted app they used. which couldn't be tracked. This was the most imperative part because if the authorities could get their hands on this information, any number of other criminals and gangs could be dismantled, just like this frozen chicken gang was. Questioning, interrogations, plea deals, and everything else were ongoing. But the police had no idea of their mode of communication. Then, something finally caught their eye. During the searches and investigations, the authorities found a platform called EncroChat. As the name suggests, it was an encrypted platform for chatting, and the criminal used it extensively all across the globe. The main reason was that they believed the police authorities could not access this app, making it safe for their day-to-day criminal activities. And initially, they were right. The police had no idea about this platform or how to hack it. However, after these arrests, a massive UK-wide operation led to this platform being shut down. But they didn't shut down the platform without extracting each and every conversation from it. Thousands of messages were recovered, and among them were the chats of these 10 people. Management plans, logistics, deliveries of tons of cocaine, cash deliveries, and the entire ins and outs of their organization were discussed on EncroChat. Over £10 million worth of drugs were discussed in the conversations, all of which were either delivered, being collected, or to be collected from spots all across the country. Within just a few weeks, the entire case unraveled. While that happened, the gang members knew that everything they had going on was exposed. What hadn't been exposed yet would eventually come out too, because the authorities had access to everything. The bank accounts, conversations, dead drops, cash, cocaine, and even their warehouses and vehicles. Documents of their shipments were additional evidence of their crimes. In simple words, they knew that they were done. They were completely at the mercy of the police and the court. The police had gathered so much evidence against them that pleading not guilty was just a waste of their own time. That is when the gang members gave in. Between 30th March 2020 and 13th August 2020, they pleaded guilty to all the offences. Perhaps they thought that pleading guilty would gain them some sympathy from the court, but it did not. 4 years went by in legal battles, waiting for trial dates and investigations. Finally, on the 26th of August 2024, the Birmingham Crown Court passed the sentences of every gang member. Maninder Dosanjh, the man who was said to be the mastermind, received a sentence of 16 years and 8 months for supplying Class A drugs, money laundering, and conspiring to export these drugs from the UK. Amandeep Rishi was sentenced to 11 years and 2 months, whereas Mohammed Usman was sentenced to 9 years and 8 months. These were the key players of the organisation since they managed the logistics, imports, exports, and distribution of cocaine. But this didn't mean that the lower-level players were shown any mercy. Rizwan Ali, Kamran Hussain, Mandeep Singh, Mithab Hussain, and Peter Masi received prison sentences between 7 and 9 years. The shortest sentences was given to the money launderers, Ashtiaq Ahmed and Saeed Hashemian. Both of them were sentenced to 2 years and 7 months and 2 years and 3 months, respectively. News reporters, journalists, the police, and even the general public were left shocked by this drug bust, because it was thought to be one of the biggest cocaine operations in the UK. The police said that this gang was possibly active for several years in the UK and successfully imported millions of pounds worth of drugs into the country. They had warehouses, they had a business to use as a front, they had specialised vans with hidden compartments, and most importantly, they had a completely secret, untraceable, and encrypted communication network. All of this made them extremely confident and allowed them to make millions of pounds in drug money. According to Detective Chief Inspector Pete Cook, this gang managed to stay under the radar for years. If they had not been caught in 2020, they probably would have expanded their drug operation into Australia and wherever else they could. And this is exactly what made this case the most interesting. The amount of drugs was mind-blowing, but the most insane part was the illusion they created. Nobody suspected frozen chickens to be laced with hundreds of kilos of cocaine. Nobody knows how many cocaine shipments they had received prior to being caught. And this illusion worked flawlessly for them for years. But today, all 10 gang members are sitting behind bars, serving the harsh sentences that they earned themselves.